Welcome back, everyone. This is the Into the Pine podcast between two skis, where Trent and I break down everything skis, everything you need to know in order to buy the products you want, in order to invest further into the sport. And we're excited to be with you today. Today, we're going to be talking about ski bindings, breaking them down. What do you need to know? How can you buy one in confidence online or in the store, and how do they really benefit you?
Yeah, and what's the difference between them all, right?
Exactly. All right, so let's go ahead and hop on in. So again, Trent, we're going to start with you and just ask you some of these questions, and we'll break these down together. But starting with the purpose of a ski binding for the very beginner skier, let's just break this down. What is a ski binding? What does it do for you? What are the benefits?
Right. Really, the ski binding, it's to hold you into the ski, but it's a safety feature for sure, right? It's a safety product. It's made to make sure that your skis don't stay on longer than they should, and that they come off appropriately so you don't get hurt.
Right. Exactly. The other benefits of a ski binding is, what are they doing for us? Besides just keeping you locked into your ski, there's a lot of development in ski bindings that are going to progress you to being locked in a little bit tighter, give you better performance, whether you're in powder or you're carving on the grim slopes, right? And you're going to notice ski racers are going to race with a different type of binding than your backcountry guy or your big powder guy,
Right.
or whoever, on those. So these bindings actually do have a lot of performance related to them. And I'm really excited for this episode. It's something Trent and I both love talking about, to break down like each individual part on how you can choose a binding that's going to fit your ski and your ski style.
Yeah, 100%. And really what we want to do is make sure that your ski style is what's coming through when you're picking a binding.
Exactly.
So
sweet. So let's hop in, and I want to talk a little bit to this beginner crowd that we, are getting into skiing maybe for the first time, or those that have been in it for a little bit and just haven't ever learned like what a binding is and what are the different pieces that really make up the performance aspect and the composition of a binding. And then afterwards, when we go through that, let's dive into the different types, and we'll talk a little bit more to this advanced crowd on how we can really get nitty and gritty on them.
Okay, right? Perfect.
So first question, what are the components of a binding? What are the parts that really make it up?
Right. So you have your toe piece, your din setting for your toe piece. Then you've got your brakes, and then you've got your heel piece and your din setting for your heel piece as well.
Right. And then we have that little small piece that, that AFD.
Yes.
That has a significant role to some extent, and smaller on other bindings.
Correct.
So,
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, awesome. So let's talk about those individually. Why don't you go ahead, Trent, break down the toe piece and the toe din? And this is a term. Let's break it down to din.
Yeah.
Let's start there. What is din? I mean, everyone hears it, and we know it's a German, abbreviation. But what is it? What does it do for us, and how can we understand it?
Yeah. So din stands for like the Deutschner norm or whatever, but it just means the German industry norm.
Yeah.
Or German standard norm, right?
Yep. The German Institute of Standardization, if you want to get technical of what it is.
But what it is they actually assign a number to a particular spring setting, and that number will release depending on different parameters. So if you, like me, I ski at about an 8.5 din.
Yep.
So what that means is when I'm getting up to speed at 60 miles per hour, if I hit a bump, my bindings won't come off. But if I crash, they will, right?
Right.
Whereas someone else, a kid, let's take a 12-year-old kid, right? If they're skiing at an 8.5 and they crash, that binding might not come off.
Right. Exactly. So what DIN really refers to, we talk about it in the industry as a number, but as we're talking on the components of a ski binding itself, I think of it as the tightness and settings of the spring within the toe piece of the binding.
Yep,
right?
100%.
So, it can kind of have different references. Each binding is going to have a different size of a spring that's in there, a different length of a spring, and that DIN refers to that binding and how much can you tighten it down and release it in a standardized process so that we have the performance we need and the safety.
Right. And that number, sometimes there's things that are arbitrary in skiing. That number is not.
Yeah.
It is a definition.
Yes. There are other things that contribute to bindings that we'll jump into that will help with staying locked in or releasing early. But that number is something that we go by the book on.
Yeah.
Right? The first time in skis.
Yeah, it's a serious number that everyone should be taking seriously.
Yeah. So let's talk about the toe piece now, right? What is the toe piece? What is the function of that to do for a ski binding?
Right. So the toe piece, obviously, it's going to lock in your boot, the toe portion of your boot. But it will eject you if you crash from the left or the right. Right.
The horizontal.
Yeah.
Axis plane, basically.
Yeah, there's wings on that binding toe piece that are gonna move according to how that spring is set.
Right. Awesome. Sweet. Let's go down. Like if I'm looking at a binding, I want to go down to the next part. What's the next part on the toe piece? We've got that AFD.
Right.
I mean, to explain to us, what does that even mean? What is an AFD? What does it stand for?
So AFD stands for anti-friction device, and what that means is when you put your boot in, that piece is going to allow the toe of your boot to move if you do crash. And so your tech, when you get it set, is going to check how much friction or how much space is in between your boot and that piece, so that you can eject safely. We don't want you to be like super tight down to that piece because then it won't be able to do its job.
Right. So, and to give you a visual on this, and I should have brought a little binding up here with me. And it always helps me to think when I look right at it. But that AFD device is like a little flat piece of plastic usually, and it's attached to, again, like a spring system usually, or something that allows you to raise and lower it. And it sits right underneath the flat part of your boot.
Yep.
If you look at the bottom of a ski boot, it's got this flat portion on it or some sort of portion that's designated to meet up to it. And that device itself, we like to get it almost flush to the boot so that it has some friction on it that allows it to move, and it keeps you safely locked into the binding, safely ejecting for a clean ejection and not like a halfway ejection where you're stuck in the ski still.
Yep.
Right.
Because that can cause some real problems.
Yeah. And on some bindings that have like multi-norm certifications or things that are a large adjustment range for different types of boots, it is actually very serious. Because if you give yourself too much room for a rockford sole, but you use a ski boot that isn't meant for that, it actually, your binding's going to fit different in the binding. It's going to shift. And people have felt it. We'll talk about that a little bit as we get further on. But a lot of people have heard about that Sullivan shift binding.
Yeah.
There were complaints about hearing a clicking sound.
Yep.
Which was the boot shifting because they didn't align that AFD correctly.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm even guilty of doing that to my own binding.
Right. It was a new thing for a while. So, all right, let's hop over to the next down. Real basic one. What is the brake of a ski binding?
Right. So really, it's the brake. It's going to stop it from going down if you're not clicked in. And then when you click in, it pops those brakes up. Most bindings, when you do that, it actually pops the brakes up and sucks them in a little bit, which is convenient.
Right, and that's nice to keep them away so you're not getting brake drag as you're skiing.
100%.
Taking a turn and your brakes are hitting the snow. Not a good feeling. I mean, it's not detrimental to you, but it's
not doing you any favors.
Not helpful. That's perfect.
Super easy. A lot of people will click them together when they put their skis away.
Yep. Awesome. All right, let's hop over to the actual next important part. I mean, moving over to heel piece and heel din is kind of the last part of our binding, right?
Right.
So for these beginner skiers, people that are learning a little bit about binding, what is the purpose of the heel piece, especially compared to we have now a heel din, right? And how does that differ from your toe din?
Right. So that heel din it's going to be set. Most bindings, it's going to be set the exact same. as your toe din.
Exact same number setting, right?
Yeah, exact same din setting. But the heel is actually going to eject you. Most of the time, it's going to eject you that vertical, right?
Yeah.
Straight out of that heel piece. And so you want to be able to have a separate din for it so that it also knows when the appropriate time to eject is.
Right. Awesome. That's what, one of the things I love about ski bindings, and to keep a big mind on, like when you're looking at buying a binding, is understanding the purpose of that heel piece.
Yeah.
They do switch between models, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about this when we go through at near the end of our podcast, our buying portion of what you need to buy, right? But that heel piece, its purpose is to push your heel down into the ski,
Mm-hmm.
right? All of our performance in skiing comes from the heel action.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? Yeah. So, and that's a lot of people call it, like, it feels almost like you're swiveling with your heels to get a lot of performance and cut and different things. And I won't say everything comes from just the heel. There's a lot that involved in skiing. But when we were talking about performance in a ski binding, that heel piece is probably the most critical portion for performance.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
And that's usually why it looks more aggressive.
Yeah, it's a big part of the binding. It's what you see, right? Mm-hmm. Awesome. Sweet. So that's a great little basic breakdown, components of a ski binding. So now let's kind of pivot over to the different kinds of bindings that are on the market, right? Because a lot of people are getting on nowadays, and I see people buying bindings that, one, are maybe meant for kids because they were cheaper, right?
Oh, yes.
Two, maybe they want to get into side country. They want to ski the resort, but they want to go, hike up a little bit and be able to use their skis as like a snowshoe, right? We call this backcountry, side country touring, right? What kind of bindings are there available? Let's break that down real quick and start with the alpine downhill bindings.
Yeah. So sometimes you'll hear the terms like ISO, or ISO 9462 to be more specific, right? Yep. And that's just referring to the industry standard. So if you went out and bought a ski boot, it's got a flat bottom, your ISO bindings are going to be more tailored to that boot in particular.
Right. So alpine downhill bindings are going to be your standard binding for skiing downhill in a ski resort, right? Like Trent just said there, we're going to go over, there's 3 different ISO standards that you should really be aware of. These are ISO. If you're going to Google them, look them up for these international, standard industry standards across the board. And that one, the first one I always check off is that 9462. Now, you can ask anyone really in the ski market. I don't know many people that actually memorize the name of an ISO standard.
No, they don't. Definitely not.
But while we're talking about these, this is an informational purpose to help you understand what that is for, and if you see it, what it is, and also just it helps break down and categorize bindings a little more.
Yeah.
So that ISO 9462, that's going to be our general safety industry performance standard.
Yeah.
That is the standard that says this binding has passed industry standards for safety and performance. You're going to eject correctly. It's going to hold you in to everything that, we can prove, so that you're trusting a good company when you're buying that binding.
Yeah.
Right. With an alpine downhill binding, right, the purpose of these are really to give you downhill performance, to lock that heel in, give you the best performance while skiing aggressively. Let's talk a little bit about what options there are in an alpine downhill binding, right?
Right.
Specifically looking at boots that have a rockered sole versus a flat sole.
Right.
Right.
So your rockered soles, you're going to want something that is able to be adjusted. So you have the term grip lock on a lot of bindings.
Yep.
And so when we say rockered soles, they're not like your straight flat. They usually have a lug, which is just a heavy duty rubber plastic piece that allows you to walk better, grip lock. But then the binding itself has grip lock compatible.
Yep.
And it's usually just an AFB plate that can be adjusted to match that rocker in that boot.
Right. And if you remember back to our episode from like last week, which was the boot episode. That we've talked about different kinds of boots. We talked about a little bit about grip walk, right? This, new. Well, it was new a few years ago, but but this technology that's come out to help people walk around the resort or getting into more touring, it's used a little bit more there. So the standard you'll want to be aware with there is going to be ISO 9523, right? Again, that standard is referring to a binding that can fit, that says it's compatible to a ISO 9523, says it is adjustable to rockered soles. If you own a boot that has grip walk, has alpine touring capabilities, it's rockered, has that swooped up toe, if you want a downhill binding, you have to have the capability to adjust in 9523.
Yeah. And I feel like those are more common these days.
Yep. Almost every binding's going to have them. You will notice, though, if you want to save money, the cheaper bindings are going to gear towards not having an adjustment.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
So, and that adjustment will hit real brief. They call that 5355. 5355, that's the standard. That is a boot or a binding that will fit to any flat-soled boot with no rocker. The binding does not have an adjustment to fit a different style boot. Right. Those are going to be the cheaper ones, generally in a low din setting, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right. Awesome. So
sweet.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into alpine touring bindings now. So what is an alpine touring binding, and like what does it do?
Yeah, I love that question.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite sections of bindings available on the market.
Yeah.
Right. And it's something that this is a new up and coming design element that our engineers are looking into and figuring out within the industry. It is a binding that is geared towards being able to ski aggressively downhill while giving you the capability to have uphill performance.
Right. So what do you mean by uphill performance?
Right. So uphill performance is breaking it down when you are able to hike up the mountain with your skis on. You usually have a skin on the bottom of the ski, hiking up a skin track or doing some side country touring in the resort, going off just the beaten path, and you have to hike uphill, right? So what you actually do is you lock your boot into that binding, and it allows a pivot motion that lets you walk with the ski on.
Yeah.
Right. Now, this is really cool because we'll talk about touring bindings, but this is the middle ground. We're finally breaching a binding that you can ski inbounds, which we refer to as in resort, or out of bounds, which we refer to as anywhere out of resort.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like that backcountry term.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So there are a couple different types of alpine touring bindings available on the market. And they really started with what we call the frame binding.
Yeah.
Right?
Like the Baron.
The Baron. Yeah. The Marker Baron is one of the most well-known frame touring bindings. The Marker Dukes came out, right? They have their EPFs and everything, like the 12.0s, I think they call them.
Yeah, I think
right? They're a lighter weight version of the Baron. So these bindings are designed, they look the exact same as your regular downhill alpine ski binding, but they have a frame around the outside that allows you to attach and detach from the ski, from the bottom part of the binding that's attached to the ski.
Yeah.
So that allows the whole frame of the binding, the toe piece and heel piece and everything to pivot with you. And the best part about a binding like that is you don't need a different boot for touring.
Yeah.
You don't need a boot that has like those little Pintec holes in the front of it. You can use a flat soled boot, anything you have.
Right? And as long as you're willing to take it up the hill, right?
Yeah.
It'll do it for you. There is a little more weight that you get with that frame.
Definitely a downside. Motion is a little different. It's not as smooth.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more weight.
Yeah, a lot more weight. But at the same time, it was the predecessor to making a ski a 50-50 option.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So you'll see these around. Marker has a lot of frame touring bindings that they had sold. Solomon has a few.
Tyrolia used to have the Adrenaline.
Yeah. Solomon's like the Guardian is what they call them.
That's right.
Yeah. And, you won't see a ton of them on their websites anymore. I think some still have a few listed, but we're starting to shift towards this new one called I call it the adaptable toe bindings.
Yeah.
They don't really have a term for this design.
I like to just call them hybrids.
Yeah, hybrid bindings,
Yeah.
right? And really what it is that the heel piece remains the same as your downhill touring or your downhill ski binding, but the toe piece can change.
Yep.
Most common ones we'll throw out here, the Solomon shift binding.
Yep.
You look that up online, we've got videos about them that show exactly how this is designed if you are curious about it. But we got your Solomon shifts, we've got your marker Duke PTs, right? And then you even move into the touring section a little more, but like a Kingpin or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Why don't you break down what that toe piece does real quick for our listeners here, Trent, so they can understand if that's even, what are the benefits of that, and can you use this in regular downhill skiing as well, and if you were in resort?
Right. So the shift and the Duke PT are similar in the overall goal of being this versatile hybrid binding, but really the toe piece can change from Alpine, which will allow you to just click in like a normal binding, or you can flip. Some of them have I almost call it like a switch. You have to flip this switch, and these pins will come out, and those pins will go into your boot. So you're not picking up and pivoting the whole binding like you were with the frame bindings, but you're allowing your boot to move freely from the ski.
Yep.
And the binding is still attached to you through those pins.
Yeah.
It's become more common. And then, so that way, once you get up, then you flip it back to downhill mode, and then you ski downhill, right?
Yep.
The Duke PT has a removable toe piece, so that underneath, it solves the same problem. It's not like a switch. Yeah, the whole toe piece comes off.
It's really like the Kingpin underneath. You have a touring toe, and then you have an attachable portion for your downhill.
Yep.
Right. Actually works really well.
Yeah,
which is really
super
cool.
well.
Awesome. So quick benefit recap for you too. If you are looking at getting an Alpine touring binding, myself, I highly recommend one of these hybrid bindings.
Yep.
Lots of benefits with them. For these bindings, you can ski downhill in any boot you have.
Yeah.
Negative to it is if you want to ski uphill, your boot has to have a toe insert for pin tech bindings, right? For the pins to attach to them. Luckily nowadays, same thing where these are becoming more common. The boots for these are becoming more common.
Yeah.
They're not hard to find. They just tend to err a little bit more on your expensive side, right?
Well, and they're even also able to they're starting to come down off the expensive side, because some boots, with the way these bindings are changing the market, some boots are only having pins in the front and not in the back of the boot.
Right.
And that allows the price point to be lower, but still allows you to get the full benefits of a binding like this.
Awesome. All right. The last section here we'll hit on it is going to be a touring binding, right? Pretty quick and easy, right? Let's break down a touring binding, really how it's set up and differs from an Alpine downhill binding.
Yeah. So these ones are much more simplistic, right? You have your Alpinist. There's some other ones. I want to say the Explorer, but I don't think that's right.
Right. Dynafit is known for their Alpine, or for their touring bindings, right? Yeah. They've got the Radicals and all these different types.
But really what they are is the toe piece is very simplistic. It has those pins. And then the heel piece is also super simplistic. And it's really, you have to have an adapter on the back of that heel. Kind of like what I was talking. Yeah. Yep. So that you can have your downhill. You're talking sub 1,500 grams. These things are really light, and they're more geared toward the person who's hiking for a long time.
Yep.
That wants to save on weight.
Avid backcountry guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Or even they're climbing around, right?
Yep.
And then their downhill performance isn't the same.
Yes.
You don't ski a specific Alpine binding the same way you would ski a downhill binding. They're more technical. They demand a little bit more, right? Because you're not as firmly locked in. You still can be, and some still have DIN settings. Yep. But it's something to be aware of.
Right. And this is what really opened up the market for that hybrid between the two.
Hmm.
And it's really the heel piece. We've already mentioned that the heel piece is like the most important part, right? And a traditional touring binding is going to have pins in the front, pins in the back,
Yep.
right? They're basically like two bars that attach to your boot. The big thing about it is they don't lock you down into the ski as well. You
Yeah.
don't have the downward pressure that is continuing to push your boot downwards, right? Now, for the avid backcountry skier, highly recommend it. Myself, having skied on multiple sets of bindings, love the hybrid bindings. When you move into a touring, you're going to get a lot less weight, which is really nice. They're going to be really easy for that uphill portion, making that a little bit easier. And when skiing in a lot of soft snow, you don't give up too much on the heel of having to be locked down, versus you're still going to have a good time,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But you want to jump off a cliff or you
Yeah.
know anything
a
like
little
that,
more serious.
a little more aggressive. You're gonna want you're not gonna want that touring,
Yeah.
that touring heel piece.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Lastly, quick point to touch on is on bindings on the market. You do have cross country, telemark bindings.
Yeah.
We're not going to jump into those, like we've kind of said before. We want to gear more towards this alpine downhill ski style, and cross country and telemark bindings are in their own little category of a ski. You go to stores that literally will just deal with those.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
So
they're more specialty.
Yep. But you'll just notice on those, you're not going to have the same setup as like something to lock your heel down. They're all free in the heel. So very different look to them. You don't have to be concerned about accidentally buying one.
Yeah.
Because it's completely different.
Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Let's move on here to this next section, which is where we're really going to start getting into the depths. So if you're a beginner skier, or someone that's been in the industry for a bit and you wanted to learn the basics of a ski binding, that's kind of what we've hit on so far. Right. But now we're going to hop in, talk a little bit more about some of the nitty gritty stuff. And specifically, I encourage all listeners to hear this is going to be about how to buy your own ski binding, right? What do you need to know? What do you need to look for? What Trent and I consider the fun part about getting into skis, you know? And including buying a cool color.
Yeah, right? 100%.
Cool. All right, let's hop over. First thing you need to determine, Trent.
Yeah, what type of binding is right for you, right? We just went over all the different types. Now you need to decide, are you touring? Are you 50-50? Are you resort? In those categories, you want to break down and see which one's right for you. If you see yourself doing like 100% resort, don't worry about looking at like a Shift or Duke PT. You're going to be paying extra for features you're never going to use.
Right, exactly. To be honest, it never hurts to have another set of skis and bindings that are meant strictly for the resort and another one set for touring if you are interested in something like that. Awesome. Well, moving into a little more of a fun part, right? Now, when we're going to go choose a binding, say I'm at the shop, I'm online, I'm cruising through the ski binding options. What is it that I am looking for? How do I decide what binding is the right fit for me? A big one on this is going to be like having the right DIN settings, right? You could buy bindings in different sizes. How do I tell that I'm buying an adult binding, not a junior binding, and it's going to fit me? And what do I need to know? What information for that?
So DIN settings are, like we've beaten to death, right? Are super important. But when you're looking at a binding and you see it says like Marker Griffin 13, the 13 is referring to the top number of that DIN. Okay. So usually it's like, I want to say 4 to 13. Right?
Yeah. I think it's 513.
Yeah. Something like that. And
usually have about 7 or 8 different settings within the range.
Yeah. So. And you usually want to find yourself in about the middle, right? And your ski tech at the shop can help you with that. But I usually like to think of it like kids are 0 to 7.
Yeah.
Once you start getting into the teenage, you're getting 7 to 11. Women's bindings usually go 11 to 13. Men's bindings go from 13 to 16. Now, a 16 DIN binding might not be the best option for most people. I would say that 95% of people don't need a DIN binding that's at an 18.
Right.
Right. Like the Jesters, the 16, that would still be able to fit like a decent amount of the market. But then there's like the Pivot 18. That's really aggressive for the majority of skiers.
Right. I mean, they even get up into 21s, 22s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless you're a professional skier, sponsored skier, or you're jumping off cliffs on the daily and you can't eject.
Yeah.
You don't need to worry about that, right? Yeah. So here's a good question for you, though, Trent, is when I'm looking at buying a binding, and I kind of get that category now, 0 to 7, kind of 0 to 9 is that more younger crowd, right? So why does it divvy up that way? What affects what size of DIN that I need to get? Like, how do I know I need a higher DIN versus a lower DIN?
Right. So there's a couple factors. One would be the size of your boot. That's actually a pretty good factor. The other's your weight, your height, your age, and then your skier type. So to break it down for you, like I said, I'm an 8.5. My ski boot sole length is 295.
Right.
And then I'm 6'1", 170, aggressive. And so that puts me at the 8.5 mark. But you might be saying or thinking, right, Trent skis an 8.5. That's only one DIN setting higher than a kid's binding.
Right.
So why can't I buy a kid's binding, right? Yeah. Because I'm not going to be skiing an 8.5.
My DIN says I ski a 5.
Right. Why can't I ski this kid's binding? Well, and it's really that spring in there. We want it to be at like a happy medium, right? So I usually ski, or like I have a pair of Tyrolia 14s, and my DIN setting hits almost perfectly in the middle of that binding.
Yeah.
And that means that the springs, they don't have to work very hard to get the performance I need, to get the safety features I need. And I could even go up or down a little bit if I needed to. But if you're in a 7, right, you get a kid's binding. Well, first, it probably won't fit your boot, right?
Yep. The binding structure of a kid's binding, real quick, is different in that the toe and heel pieces are actually smaller.
Much smaller.
They don't really typically fit adult boots. Even if you can get it to fit, it's not built around that, and it looks weird. So just to break that down so we can kind of move into more the DIN setting aspect ratio of it.
Yeah. So then you say, like, you're a 7 and your binding max is at a 7, your spring is going to work harder to get the same kind of performance.
Right.
So we usually want to be right in the middle. Once again, most women are a little bit lighter than men. That's why they kind of cap out or most women's bindings cap out at 11. But they're still able to get the great performance and the same features as a men's ski, just with a little less aggressive DIN setting.
Yeah, a little less higher number, a little less bigger spring.
Usually saves you some dollars too.
I like to take, aggressiveness is a big part of it, but I like to lower that term just a little bit because weight and height have a major portion to do with like needing a bigger spring, like you're saying.
Right.
Now, with that said too, a female skier that is race skiing or just skiing super hard and aggressive totally can rock a bigger DIN setting binding and should look at it. And what I would recommend to everyone that's looking at buying a binding, if you don't already know what you set your DINs at when you ski, go online, look up the DIN setting calculator, right? Or whatever you want to find. It's listed everywhere on multiple websites. You can go into a ski shop. You can look up and do it yourself on markers forms.
Yeah.
Find your DIN setting and find what that number is. So like Trent, talking 8.5, so I'm about 9.5. Once I know that, I can look and say, okay, what binding am I looking at? If I'm riding an 11, my 9 is, only 2 indicators away from hitting the 11, right? Where if I'm on a 13 and starts at 5, goes to 13, I'm about 4 away from 13, 4 away from 5. That's right in the middle, dude.
Right. Well, this is important to be aware of. There was one time a guy came into the ski shop. He had like your typical front side ski.
Yeah.
And he was an older gentleman, probably 70. He was riding a Pivot 15.
Whew.
And his binding couldn't go any lower. Right. And I was like, I was a little bit concerned about who had sold him this because it was way too much binding for him.
Yeah.
He was bottomed out at it. But really, like if you like a style of binding, they probably make it in a lot of different DIN ranges.
Definitely. So, and to give you a good visual, what I love to think about to just wrap up this DIN setting talk, like Trent is saying, reason we want to be in the middle is we have that elasticity of the spring. The spring doesn't have to work hard to keep you in. If you think about a spring or anything, a slinky, whatever you can think of, and you pull that all the way apart, right? Think about that, and now think about saying it's completely extended, and I'm going to put some force on this as I'm going through a turn, right? How much until it lets go?
Yeah.
Right? That's what we're talking about, right? Once it's completely extended, you don't have much force you have to put into that until it's going to pop, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to go out of the binding. Well, if that is only halfway pulled apart, that spring has that compression, you have to pull it all the way to extension before you're going to pop out of your binding. Right. And eject, right? And that's all force aspect ratio and how these are designed. And even towards the point of if you're on the low end, right? Well, then you're risking safety of you have to extend that entire spring out before you pop out of that binding, which is a lot of force to have to put on. And that's where we're talking this, pivot 15 that is very aggressive for somebody that rides at the lowest number of it.
Yeah, and it was bonkers.
Yep. Awesome. Well, that's great. I think we really nailed DIN settings for, to break that down in a bit there. Let's talk a little bit about these other features you should just consider when you're looking at buying ski bindings.
Yeah.
Right?
So one of them would be like, how big is your binding, right? And this isn't super common where we ski. It's way more common in the East, right?
Yep.
So if you get a ski that's 75 millimeters underfoot, right?
Yep.
And you are going to, most of the bindings, not most, but there's a decent amount of bindings on the market that will be too wide for your ski.
Yep.
And
they're going to hang off the edge,
Yep.
right? Specifically the toe pieces is what we see. Right.
There are bindings. The looks are narrower. There are bindings that are narrower, but it is something to be aware of.
Yeah.
For sure.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about, I want to talk about toe pieces and heel pieces, right? They vary in construction between brands and the type of models that they sell. Right. And this is where we also see that we're talking about fit. Popular ski binding, love to sell, and it's easy, is going to be that Tyrolia Attack 13 or Attack 12 and Attack 14s. Yeah. Well, they've got multiple of them, and you can find them everywhere. So with something like that, right? Let's break down, when you're looking at a toe piece, you're looking at buying a ski binding. We know we want to get something with the right DIN setting. That just helps us get in the right category. Yep. Right. So that we can say, okay, this one, and this one are in that DIN setting. Now we can pick between, our looks, our Solomons, our Atomics, markers, right? Looking at those bindings, we have actually, a lot of them, you'll notice the toe pieces look different, right? So what's the difference between a horizontal toe piece versus a vertical toe piece? We're talking about the spring in there and what they look like. Right.
So a vertical toe piece would be like your a shift, a look, and then horizontal would be your Tyrolias, your markers. And really, when it boils down to it, it's going to be a lot of the way that it looks. Yep. Right? You're going to have, like, your markers are going to have a little more metal to them. But, like, with the difference between vertical and horizontal, performance-wise, you're not really changing anything. They're both going to release. They're both, like, maybe the horizontal, like the pivot, it's going to have, the wings are a little broader, a little more aggressive, right? They're holding you in a little differently. But, like, overall, there's not a big difference between them.
Right. I often like to think about them, if you're going to get real down into the nitty gritty of it, that horizontal toe piece really attaches. The left side of the toe is attached to one side of the spring. The right side of the toe is attached to the other side. So you're pulling at kind of an equal ratio, right? Versus a vertical, you've got one end that's fixed. Yeah. And then another end you're attaching into construction-wise onto just the one. Now, That used to be a big deal
Yeah.
because that you could actually feel the tension difference of those two toe pieces. Today's bindings, most of that's been fixed,
Yeah.
right? They're giving you either a bigger spring to compensate for that on maybe a vertical toe piece or vice versa.
Hmm.
So you may notice a little bit on a wider binding that you might have a little bit easier edge contact, edge to edge. But for the most part, general skiing, not much of a difference.
Yeah. You're not really going to notice a ton of things. But I actually didn't know that.
Yeah,
Vertical
kind of
versus
a
horizontal. Yeah, I
cool
like that.
vertical horizontal
I like
design
that.
setup, how they could benefit you,
Hmm.
which is something I love about Tyrolias. And we talk about their horizontal toe piece setup is it's so easy. It
Yeah.
feels so smooth to go side to side, and they maintain a light binding. So when you're going in the
Super
park, doing different stuff, messing around, it's just very versatile,
Hmm.
right? You'll notice Solomon does their STH binding, which is a massive toe piece, vertical toe piece binding. So along with that, what you'll notice with like a big horizontal or vertical toe piece binding can often be the difference of skiing like powder and deep snow that allows you to have a little more like lift in the toe piece,
Hmm.
right? Versus a side to side performance,
Right.
right?
Okay, great. So what would you say would be the next thing, right? We kind of broke down the toe piece. What else should I be considering?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about design and heel piece. They go hand in hand oftentimes.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the Tyrolia three-piece design binding. I'm actually trying. I want you to break that down for me
Yeah.
because you know it
Yeah.
so well. But talk a little bit about that. I mean, as we go between brands, you're going to notice generally to lay out for everyone a heel piece. If you are wanting something that has better a better lock in a vertical release, which you were generally talking about the heel.
Hmm.
Better performance on that. We want an aggressive action heel piece,
Yep.
right? You'll notice Marker, their Griffin series, and their Jesters.
Very
Now we
aggressive.
use the exact same heel piece too,
Yeah.
right? Very aggressive. They have a very high action to them where they are just pushing that boot directly downwards,
Hmm.
right? You move over into their Squire series. You move into Tyrolia's attack like 11s area,
Hmm.
11s, 12s. Those are going to be using a little bit different heel piece that's a little less aggressive. It's got a different design to it that you can actually eject from, a little cleaner. Also, if you are just trying to get out of the binding when
It's
you're
a
done
little
skiing,
easier to get out of. Yeah.
easier, a little more functional for the average skier, I would say,
Hmm.
right? But let's talk in. So, I mean, that's kind of a general breakdown. I don't think you really have to go much further than just understanding that the higher that action on that heel piece, generally the more downhill performance you're going to get, but the tighter it's going to lock you in. That
Yeah.
could be good or bad depending on how you ski.
Yeah.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about that Tyrolia binding. I want to hear your thoughts and how we can relate that to some other bindings as well.
Yeah. So the Tyrolia binding, it's a three-piece. What that means is you have your base, so what's connecting it to the ski.
Yep.
And then you have a piece that's connecting to your boot. And then your third piece is the lever, right? And that's going to be when you click in, it's going to go up. But because it's three pieces, the leverage of that is different. It's easier to get in and out of. It doesn't hit as hard. Like a Griffin, like you step in and it hits hard. You can hear it.
Yep.
Boom, right? But the Tyrolia attack series doesn't hit as hard, but it still locks you in. And it's just because they use their leverage differently. The other brand that uses this setup would be like the Warden series is also a three-piece series.
Right.
It's not quite as, I think Tyrolia has really nailed the three-piece.
Yeah.
The Wardens are still good. The leverage is just a little different. When I worked at a ski shop, I'd hand people the binding and be like, "You can flip it with your hand."
Right. Right.
The Tyrolia is super easy. You can flip with your hand. The Warden's a little harder. The Griffin's next to impossible.
Definitely. Yep. So a lot of benefits there.
Mhm.
And we could go all day talking about each different binding from each different brand.
Yeah.
It would actually be really fun for Trent and I.
Yeah, I'd love that.
So if that's something that does interest you guys as viewers and you want to hear a little more about specific brands, please comment, send something into us so that we can, know what you want to hear. So finally, we are buying our ski binding. We've got what type of binding we want.
Mhm.
We've got what features we decided on, so we knew what kind of brand we wanted to go with, right? And we're went with a marker or a Tyrolia here. Lastly, I always like to mention once you've got that binding purchase, the last thing you have to determine is going to be your mount position.
Right.
Something that is a whole episode worth talking about.
Right.
We're gonna keep it
before we jump into
that.
The quick breakdown of mount point. I think we'd be remiss to not at least touch on the heel piece of the pivot.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
the pivot is very popular, especially with park riders, and it's unique because it can eject vertical and horizontal because of the way that it
in the heel piece.
Because of the way that it pivots. Right.
Yeah, the way it moves.
Yeah.
It is a swivel heel piece.
Mm-hmm.
Can scare people, but it actually locks you down very securely in the back of that heel. I'm glad you brought that up. There's something, going around as well that the safest downhill ski buying on the market you can buy is actually, something branded by Look and Rossignol for their Pivot 12.
Yeah.
Real big, the important thing here. Pivot 12, right? The Pivot 15, different binding.
It's different. It's full metal.
Yeah. So that Pivot 12, they're talking about the release on the toe piece is very clean, easy, and safe. And the release on the heel piece is very clean, easy, and safe.
Mm-hmm.
Cool parts like Trent's talking about with this heel piece, though, that it has that high action in the back, but it uses some swivel components that allow it to move side to side and vertically so that it's easy to get on and off. It's easy to eject, very safe.
Yeah, very popular.
Yeah. Some people take a ride or two to get used to the feeling of it, but it's not much different from a regular performing binding.
Yeah.
So, and just to touch on it, that Pivot 15, Pivot 16 uses a complete different toe piece.
Yep.
And that's where we notice many mistakes on the market of people buying that Pivot 15 because they hear it's the safest. And then they realize their DIN setting is a 4 and they need a Pivot 12.
Yeah.
Right? Or whatever.
I mean, they make a Pivot 14.
Yeah.
And like the 12, like you're saying, is plastic toe piece. But the 14 is also the difference between the 14 and the 15 is the jump to full metal.
Full swivel in the toe. It doesn't even have the wings that actually allow that spring to compress. You have to completely turn the toe piece to the side.
Yeah,
to eject.
Yeah.
So awesome for aggressive riders. Not something I recommend for any beginner.
Yep.
So
perfect.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So let's wrap it up real quick. Just a quick note on that mount position, like we were going to talk about. Don't want to spend too much time on it, but really hit that if you do buy a new binding, look into what mount position you want to drill that binding into on your ski.
Because it will be married.
Yes.
They are married to that.
You can only do it 3 times as recommended within the industry. You can re-drill a ski 3 times until it, in air quotes, compromises the integrity of the ski.
Yep.
Right? So with that, we're just going to talk about it. Almost 90% of people are going to mount their binding at the recommended mount position.
Yep.
Right? Which, go ahead and explain to us real quick. What is that?
So the recommended mount position is the mount position that's recommended by the manufacturer. It's different for each ski. They ski it and the way the rocker and the camber are that helps determine that mount position.
Yep. Can't go wrong with a recommended mount. If you question at all what you should do, I say go to recommended.
Yep. Most of my skis are recommended. I haven't had a problem with them. They're great. Yeah.
That's the way majority of skiers enjoyed it on that ski. As for myself, I like to move generally towards a little different style where we start talking about true camber and true center skis, right? A true camber mount position on a ski is generally mounted in the center of the cambered portion of the ski. It's a little more of a freestyle feel, which is what I like to ride because I love to have a freestyle. That's my ski style. I like to pivot a lot. I like to swivel and kind of lift my edges a little more off the snow. Right.
And then the next one would be true center. This is usually for people who are skiing park. Right?
Yes.
They want true center because they're going to be landing switch. They're going to be riding rails, and they don't want a ton of ski in front of them and a little ski behind them because it will compromise their balance. It will compromise the way that they land, then the way that they balance on a
rail
a
or a
rail.
jump.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right. And then lastly, just so you know, you can mount the binding anywhere you want on your ski.
Yep.
They have, generally go by centimeters, 1 centimeter back, 1 forward.
Mm-hmm.
You'll hear that a lot. And it's always worth doing some research on where people have talked about.
Yeah.
There's a lot of forums out there that can help you figure out what's best for your ski and your style. Again, if you ever question it, go recommend it.
Go recommend it.
If you
Can't go wrong.
Yep. If you want to try something new, do some research and listen to our episode on mount positions.
Yep. Perfect.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, this was our episode on ski bindings, breaking down, what the nitty gritty is between different types of bindings on the market, how you decide what binding is right for you and what their general use is for yourself.
Yep.
Right?
Perfect. And once again, if you have any questions, feel free to comment, reach out to us. We'll help you find a good pair of bindings if you continue to have questions. We're here to help.
Definitely. So visit us at intothepine.com. Send us your questions, watch our YouTube series, and tune in next week for our episode. And we are excited to talk to you guys more about the nitty gritty on skis, journey further into the pine.
Thank you.